The Apostle Paul wants to give us a glimpse of heaven as a relief from those things that we may suffer here below. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, he said, we need to look to eternal things. Good morning, this is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Wednesday. As many Christians were facing persecution during the New Testament days, Paul writes to comfort those who are in Corinth and even to give them the promises of heaven to come. He says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 1, for we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. First of all, Paul talks about the struggles that they were facing in Corinth and other areas around in those days. In chapter 4 and verse 16, he said, our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. He is actually comparing our physical struggles that we face every day with our spiritual soul, which God is working in. We recognize that our outward man and the daily headaches and the heartaches will all come. We'll face those. Solomon even describes our bodies deteriorating in Ecclesiastes 12:3 when he said, when the keepers of the house shall tremble, or the strong men shall bow down, the grinders will cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows will be darkened. He must have experienced some of the signs of aging himself. But Paul reminds us that even though the outward man is perishing, our inward man, that spiritual being, our soul, is being renewed day by day. And the closer we get to actually leaving this earth behind, the more important it is that we strengthen our relationship with God, preparing for heaven. So he says here, we know that if this earthly house, this tent that we're living in, is destroyed one day, and certainly it will be. Even though people try every secret to the fountain of youth, one day this decaying body will succumb to the elements and die. He even refers to this earthly body as a tent. Have you ever had to live in a tent very long? I mean, one overnight camp out is good enough for me. All the problems that you have in a tent, we have in this earthly body, right? They're frail. They leak in rain whenever you're trying to sleep in a tent. They're uncomfortable. So why would we want to prolong that stay in such a temporary housing? The promise is when the tent is destroyed, or just decays away for that matter, we have a building from God. He's the master contractor. As Jesus has said, he was preparing this place for us. This will be a house not made with hands. I know that our earthly structures have oftentimes problems, maybe faulty materials, poor contractors, but not his house. The house that God makes for us will be eternal in the heavens. A promise of eternity in heaven and a place for each of us that are trusting and following the Lord. That's why Paul says in verse 8, I am well pleased rather to be absent from this body and to be present with the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. I hope you're preparing for that new address one day, that new home, maybe new neighbors, where we will stand before the Lord and worship him forever in that wonderful place he's prepared for all those who trust in him.